So as we consider the number of people that can be in a communication exchange, you have to ask yourself, am I truly communicating with the authentic version of who this person is before me right now? Also, do know that I am a proponent on making sure that those I teach communication skills to and teach the concepts and the principles of communication, understand that you will not be the same person in this moment as you were the previous moment. And so then in that exchange that I mentioned before as an example, where you want to go shopping with your friends, but really your mom or your parents are in the back of your mind saying, you can't afford it, we're on a budget, we don't want to waste money, we're in a recession, it's inflation. All of those things are rushing in your head. And then you speak your mom's words. I can't afford to go. Now, the sender has put that forth in the communication process. How many people are in that conversation? It's 3. Because you're speaking your beliefs of someone else, which really aren't the beliefs of your own. Because you know that you would like to go shopping. And if there's a will, there's a way. Can you think outside of the box to have the income and have the money to go shopping in that moment? That's an example, though, of how many people are truly a part of a communication exchange. So even when you are having a conversation with your partner and you're disagreeing with your partner, is that reflective or of your partner's opinion? Is that reflective of their beliefs, or is that opinion something that's been instilled in them from someone else, or their parents, or an experience? All of these ideologies confuse the communication process. However, once you understand the basic tenets and principles, and you can slow down the communication flow, you can meet an agreement with the person that you're wishing to receive your message, and you can better influence the outcome of that communication, both to the benefit of yourself as well as the person on the other end of that communicative exchange. So when we think about how many people are in a communication process, just remember, it may not just be you and the person that you are sending the message to. So to understand the communicator, we must appreciate the role of identity, motivation, perception, and communication resources. So in understanding the communicator, we have to understand that they are presenting their identity and self-concept, their motivation for having that conversation, which entails their emotion, needs, and goals of the communication exchange, their perception. Remember, we're thinking about the context, the content. And then we're also thinking of communication resources, which entails mindfulness, knowledge, and skills. Communicators in an interpersonal communication setting really must understand the complexities when you do a deep dive in these concepts, that even identity and self-concept, upon which I will spend a lot talking about, is something that you have to reverse engineer to make sure that you are showing up to the conversation as your authentic self, that you are presenting your thoughts, your ideas, your feelings, your theories, your emotions, and not those of other people who have been in your life to influence you. Now, when we think about the pieces of the interpersonal communication as presented from a rhetorical standpoint, we think about the interpersonal needs. We're speaking here of what motivates us. Why do we do what we do? Again, this is tied into our identity of self, our self-concept. All of these constructs shape all aspects of our interpersonal communication. A person's self-concept will in fact influence who they are in a relationship with their motivations and expectations for behavior towards themselves as well as towards others. Their potential for developing and using communicative resources is also important to understand that level of self-concept or identity and the important role it plays in understanding the contextual design of interpersonal communication. Moving to the interpersonal needs, we talk about the emotions and how a communicator feels about a certain situation. But again, when we reverse back to the concept of self and the relationship that we have with ourselves, those moments upon which we have to define who we are and where we stand in each pillar of our lives will in turn have a direct impact on how we respond emotionally in the communicative exchange when we are receiving or sending a message, and how much we will allow noise to impact that communication. We're speaking of love. We're speaking of sadness. We're speaking of anger. We're speaking of even jealousy in the moment. We're also speaking of instances in which you as a human are sitting as a person who identifies as a woman and seeing another woman walk into the room with 6-inch heels on. This was an example that we've heard in our communication discussions. And so how does that make you feel? Do you feel strong? Do you feel powerful in seeing her walk in 6-inch heels and actually keep her balance? Or did you feel like it impacts your confidence that this person may be of a different class than you? Are you labeling this person? Are you placing them in a ranking system when you see them? Again, this is an example because this is something that we've discussed in our communication circles. But however, when you talk about how you feel and your self-confidence, your self-esteem, your self-worth, as it relates to your relationship with yourself, and then how it plays into your interpersonal needs as it connects to some of the sampling of emotions such as love, sadness, anger, and jealousy, they are power moments that you bring to the communication exchange process. So emotions are more than just feelings. They are evaluations of the other and of the situation, is what we see here in the type. They are motivating in the sense that our feelings stimulate us to act or achieve, to change a current situation. Indeed, the word emotion comes from the same root word as motivation. To be emotional is to be motivated. So keep that in mind when we're having conversations. Understand that that is a factor upon which we need to recognize and understand, and it could be a tool that could be used for the good in the conversation, or it could be used towards the bad. It could be a positive impact, or it could leave a negative impact on that exchange of communication. The last piece we want to consider is the inclusion, involvement, the control and dependence, and the intimacy or the affiliation. So as a part of the human condition, it's been shown that we need to know what defines us and how it defines us if we're going to show up authentically in the communication process. What we need and how we need defines us and motivates us to behave in certain ways. So when we talk about psychologists and their different theories with regards to this issue, many argue that we have needs of inclusion and involvement. We also have needs of control and interdependence. And we have needs of affection, affiliation, and intimacy. Now, we also talked about in class how this ties into, and we talked about in our communication circles, how this notion also ties into the notion of the love languages and what people perceive to be important to them and how it impacts and affects the building of their relationships and their ability to communicate effectively. So when we talk about those love languages that some scholars have identified and labeled, it comes into play here when we're considering the needs and the parts of the human condition. Just as an example, inclusion and involvement stems from our need to be a part of a group, to be included in what's going on. We humans are social creatures who derive our self-concept from the primary groups to which we belong. We understand that without others, we cannot exist. Thus, we are strongly motivated to be included, to be a member of a group or groups. Also, there's the need to be in control of our lives, control and independence. All of us want to be able to determine what happens to us. Although people differ in how much control they need, there is some need to be in control in all interpersonal relationships. For example, although you like being with your friends or your romantic partner, you don't always want them to determine where you go, how you spend your time, or with whom you spend your time with. The third example here we're going to talk about is affiliation and intimacy. The quote, "all you need is love," is a popular lyric, but while it may be overstated, some people have emphasized in the scholarly field that everyone feels like they need to be loved by someone, and they all need to feel love for someone in order to be healthy and happy. The need for affiliation and intimacy is the need to be liked or loved and to be able to show affection. Intimacy, a closely related concept, is the need to be known by others and to know others. It is the need to be able to share who you are, your likes, your dislikes, your pains, your fears, your triumphs, and your accomplishments. These are the things that scholars say define you. In our interpersonal relationships, we see those needs as intricately linked, and also understanding that people want to be intimate with those that they like and love. So in understanding how these three ideologies come together, we are going to discuss them and break them apart and come back and revisit them, because it's super important that these are pieces of the emotional puzzle and the construct that has to be defined by you in your relationship with yourself, so that you can control the outcome of your situation and your exchange and communication when you are not having some of these needs met, or you don't feel like these needs are being met. So when we consider the three basic interpersonal goals, arguably one can challenge them, and that's what we're going to talk about in a subsequent video. But coming back to the content and the context that makes up interpersonal communication, we have to understand that the content of the message is the information that we exchange and the understanding we achieve in a transaction, as well as the context is the situation in which communicators tend to send and receive the content of a message. Now, what happens with this exchange when we understand its fluidity? So let's talk about the relational cultures and what is relational culture. When we focus on the contexts that are more influential in interpersonal communication, we have to discuss the relational context as well as the cultural context within understanding the situations upon which communicators send and receive messages. Now, there's also a lifespan context. We will say that towards the end of our objectives and talking within this module. But the relational context and the cultural context can be broken down as such. Julia Wood suggests that we create relational cultures because our intimate interpersonal relationship is the background that helps us understand the behaviors we can use and how to interpret them. Relational context is the behavior of communicators that takes place in, and it creates the relational context. We discussed the ways we communicate relationally as relational bids and relational responses that define who we are and what kind of relationship we have with our relational partner. So when you peel this back, the theorists suggest that relational partners experience tension because the fact that communication structures and processes create meanings about our relationships with others, we can talk about national cultures, ethnic cultures, religious cultures. We can talk about family cultures, friendship cultures, partner cultures. But also, when we think about that in the whole of relational cultures, it is the underlying tension that sometimes is unspoken that we have to take into consideration in order to have a meaningful exchange of dialect. Relational dialect theory suggests that relational partners experience tensions. These tensions are often experienced as points of change in the relationship. When we realize that we need to balance or rebalance the tension, then we act in some way that changes the relationship. 3 tensions operate in almost all interpersonal relationships: the tension between autonomy and connection, the tension between openness and closeness, and the tension between predictability and novelty. We will save that and unwrap it in the next module, because that, when we talk about relational tensions, when we talk about the underlying cultural pieces and the pillars upon which that rests on, I want to make sure that we give that the attention that it needs in the next module. So again, remember, there are multiple people in a communication setting, whether you see them or not. There are a lot of factors at play, and we're only in the first section of our communication journey together. And that's even understanding what interpersonal communication is. We have a long way to go. Hopefully this conversation and learning this information will save you time, headache, heartache, money, attitude moments, anger issues, all of that good stuff. Stay plugged in. See you in the next module.